All right, yeah, welcome everybody. I'm Jeff, and I am very, very pleased to welcome Niels Verdonk, a good friend of mine for a long time. Niels is a CST, Certified Scrum Trainer, and Agile Coach. He's based in the Netherlands, one of my favorite countries, but there you go. Use this piece of information for you. He's a partner and a coach at a company called Better Change, which he's I know quite a few of the other people at Better Change, and they're all lovely people as well. Like I said, I've known him for many years, and he's joined us on our mission at Agile Mastery Institute in delivering, as well as the other things that he delivers, our long-term pathways for Scrum Masters and product leaders. Today, he's going to talk to us about one of the most important aspects of Agile delivery, which is reducing the delay of delivery of value to our customers. All of you who have that Agile Manifesto by the side of the bed will remember our highest priority is to satisfy our customers through continuous and early delivery of business value. There are all sorts of delays at all different points in our work, and Niels is going to help us identify and reduce some of those. Before I hand over to him, though, I just want to make you aware of a couple more meetup sessions we've got coming up in the next few weeks. It's quite a busy time here. On the 12th of March, so less than 2 weeks' time, we've got dysfunction mapping, which is one of the new funky, trendy things with its inventor, Michael Lloyd. He's coming to share how we can use that tool to help us in our agile approaches. Then in April, on the 10th of April, we've got how to use liberating structures, which is a set of facilitation tools to help your events, meetings, and relationships improve. And that's with another one of our licensed guides, Peter Zilka. And then on the 24th of April, we've got my top 12 agile anti-patterns with Stefan Volpers, and I've just got his book here, which he's going to be telling you a little bit about. That's on the 24th of April. Right. In terms of logistics here, feel free to add your questions in the chat. Ashlyn and I will be capturing those questions and saving them up to the end, just to allow a nice flow of delivery through Niels' session. All right. Over to you, Niels.
Thanks for the introduction, Jeff. So you set some high expectations, so I hope I can live up to those. So welcome, everyone. We're going to talk about delay, as Jeff already indicated. Stole my thunder a little bit because already gave away a lot of the things that are over here. But something about me, I used to be a software developer in the 90s, and I'm still developing software, so I like to do that, but I don't think people pay me professional anymore to do that. I was really inspired by Kent Beck on his book on extreme programming, and I started my first Scrum team in 2006. And ever since, I've been helping organizations with agility on a leadership level, team level, product owners, Scrum Masters, etc. I'm a fellow with Better Change, and I'm an AMI pathway guide for the Scrum Mastery and the Product Mastery pathways. I'm a certified Scrum trainer and a certified coach. So that is enough about me. So you already were invited to join Mentimeter, and a lot of you already are connecting. If you're not, then take a look at the chat and you can still connect. So we have a majority of people are Scrum Masters, we have Agile coaches, and we have, fortunately, a single product owner. Also, we have a developer, manager, and a few others. All right, so thanks for sharing a good feel for who is in the room over here. Okay, let's talk about the agenda a little bit. What can you expect from me today? So we're going to talk about delay and trying to quantify that. And I'm going to introduce a concept which is quite theoretical and difficult, but I'm hoping to give you a very brief, concise, easy understanding of that. Then we can talk about effects on an organizational level, on an inter-team level, and on a sprint level. And then feel free to ask questions as you go, but I would like to continue and finish this part of the presentation first, and we'll have some time for Q&A. I'll make the slides available together with some maybe interesting links or materials that I will mention. I'm hoping to also give you a couple of things to try out on each of these when we are understanding some of the effects that are happening. All right. So Jeff already mentioned, right? So we are there to deliver continuous value to our customer, to early and early and often delivery. So business value is what product owners use to prioritize their product backlogs. And so I'm usually the wrong space bar all the time, sorry. And so companies spend a lot of time on prioritization, and they spend a lot of time in creating business cases, estimating work, deciding on prioritization. And they do that on a portfolio of maybe on a product or organizational level, but also on a backlog level. And usually they do that by value and effort, right, to reach the maximum return on investment. But mostly the delay effects are ignored. And I'm hoping to give you a little bit of insights on that. So let's take a look at delay. So we can take a look at delay on a sprint level. And I'm pretty sure that delay happens in every sprint. And I think this is probably the reason that we have daily scrums and the Kanban meetings. And on the day-to-day basis, there's a lot of things that are not going as expected. We have unexpected results, we have PBIs that are not ready to start in a new sprint, or we have incompleted stories that we're not able to get done in the sprint. On the inter-team level, we have also delays, and usually these delays are related to dependencies. Dependencies on input from stakeholders that is delayed, or dependent on another team that we need to collaborate with, that's depending on us, or we're depending on them, or we're depending on knowledge. There's just a lack of domain knowledge or technical expertise that we lack in a team. And we also have delays on an organizational level. And usually I like to call that on portfolio level. We have slow prioritization. We just don't know, we're not sure. So we're gonna do more analysis and more thinking and more meetings, and all the time things are not progressing. There's a lot of delay happening in parallelization, and I will also speak to that. And on a portfolio level, sometimes we do a lot of work on stuff that's simply not the right things. And so we continue too long on things that are not viable, feasible, or desirable. And we should have stopped earlier. So that is actually delaying other initiatives that could have started. All right, so before we talk about delay, there's actually a gentleman that wrote a very interesting book that's called The Principles of Product Development Flow. And it's written by Donald Reinertsen, and he has some pretty solid statements about product management in general. If you want to know everything there is to know about cost of delay, then this will be your resource. Although I have to warn you, there's a lot of mathematical and statistical stuff in there. So you have to be prepared for that. I'd also heard that it's very good and recommended for people with insomnia. So if you're not prepared to read that book, then I hope I give you a little bit of the short rundown of the essence of it. So let's try to see if we can quantify delay costs. So let's take 3 initiatives. For example, we have a project that has a potential of revenue of 2 million per month, and it also has a development effort needed for about 2 months. Project B has also a potential of 2 million per month, but it actually takes a little bit longer. It takes us 4 months to implement. And finally, we have initiative C, which has a higher potential of 4 million per month, and it has a development effort needed for 2 months. So what I would like you to do in the Mentimeter is to tell me which of these, what is the best possible order of execution for these initiatives? In which order should we execute these initiatives? And you should be able to answer that in the Mentimeter. All right, I think we have already quite a few answers so far. I still see answers coming in, but we can already take a look at it. And I think you already mastered this one because most of you got it right. It's the order CAB. Let's take a look why that actually makes sense. So when we take these projects and we can visualize them in terms of the potential and revenue versus the duration required on the horizontal and vertical axes. We can visualize that by, if we're starting with the project that you indicated we should start with first, C, we will get return on investment when C is finished. We will start after that with project A, and we'll get return on investment 2 months later. So what we've actually done is by starting with project C, we have delayed the potential return on investment of project A by another 2 months. So delay cost might be a little bit confusing term because we call it cost, but actually it's delayed revenue, you know? So the cost of not getting the revenue of project A, we've delayed that by 2 months. So this is what we call delay cost. And we can say, well, we've delayed potential of 2 million per month by 2 months. So we have delayed 4 million of potential revenue. Make sense? And after that, we'll start with project B. Project B has a return on investment, and we delayed project B by 4 months. So 2 million potential per month times 4 months is 8 million. So we have actually delayed by doing things this way. We have a delay cost of 12 million. Yeah. There is always going to be delay cost because we can't do everything in parallel without any additional cost. We're going to take a look at that later. All right, so now if CAB is the best order, then BAC is the worst possible order. All right, so let's take a look at how that would have looked. If we would have started with project B, we will get the return on investment of that after 4 months. Then we'll start with project A, and we've delayed that for 4 months. So that is a delay cost of 8 million. We start project C after 6 months, and there's a 4 million of potential. So 4 months of delay. Actually, this is incorrect. It should have been 6. I will correct that later. But this actually would be 6 months extra delay times 4 is 24 delay cost. So the total delay cost in this worst possible order execution would be 32. I made an error here, but just bear with me. That was for 32. Now, the worst possible order of execution is almost double the delay cost versus the best order of execution. But that is unfortunately not how a lot of organizations are working, because a lot of organizations are working on a lot of things in parallel. So let's for a moment take a look at if we would have started all these initiatives at once, and we would put 50% of our capacity in project B, then that would then, by argument, approximately take 8 months to finish, right? We'll put 25% of our capacity in project A and 25% of our capacity in project C, which will then also take 8 months to finish. And all of them will be finished and get return on investment after 8 months. So by doing that, we have delayed project B by an additional 4 months. And so that is a delay cost of 8. We've delayed project A by an additional 2 months. So that is a delay cost of 12. We delayed project C by additional 6 months. That's a delay cost of 24. So the delay cost in the best order of execution is 12. The worst possible order of execution is 32. And if we do everything in parallel, then we have a delay cost of 44 million. So hold on. Think about that for a moment. So by choosing the worst possible order of execution, we make the worst possible choices. We will still better off than doing things in parallel. So what I'm trying to to make a case for is that I would like organizations to make choices regardless, because even if you are sucking at choices and you make the worst possible choices, you're still better off than making no choices and still executing things in parallel. All right. So this is a way for us to quantify delay cost and think about in which order are we going to work on things and how much are we doing. And actually, you might say, Niels, we already know that. When we did waterfall, we knew that we had return on investment all the way at the end of the project. And that when we were working in Scrum, iteratively and incrementally, we had return on investment already at every step of the way. And so really nothing new, right? So we know this. What we also know is that by working in waterfall, we only had the learning point all the way at the end. When we sometimes learned that what we built for the past 2 years, nobody needed and nobody wanted. So by working on things iteratively and incrementally, we can actually already have early learnings and probably make better informed decisions to maybe stop projects and in favor of other things. So we can quantify delay in terms of revenue, but we can also quantify delay in terms of delayed learning, right? So you probably heard about Eric Ries, who says, if you're not a little bit ashamed of your MVP, then you've waited too long, right? So we can continue polishing up and gold plating our MVP because we don't want to be ashamed of it. And then 2 months later, we realize that, hey, nobody needed this. And so we've actually wasted 2 months that we could have worked on other things. All right, so let's take a look at some of the delays that we can identify on a portfolio level. Already mentioned, that is what I see in many organizations, too much work in parallel. The paradigm thing that people think is that, yeah, the sooner we start on it, the sooner we finished. Well, I just hope that I visualize that that's not really always making sense, because there's a lot of delay cost when you parallelize. Yesterday that word went a lot better. But, all right. So when you work on things in parallel, there's even a fact that we didn't take into consideration, and that's the overhead of coordination and context switching. So we didn't even factor that in. So the real situation is even worse than the 44 million that I made a case for. So but there might be still a reason that we work on things in parallel, because yeah, we don't have anyone that is able to work on everything, right? So we have scattered islands of knowledge. People have specialization and they cannot work on things. So that is why things are happening in organization in parallel, but we should be aware that that can be costly. What is also something I see in organizations is that when we have project A, B, and C, and we have project manager A, B, and C, then I'm trying to argue that we should work on things sequentially. But that means that we're going to tell project manager B and C, sorry, we're not going to work on your project for the next 4 months. All right, so that's usually not an acceptable answer. They all want to see progress. So we tend to pleasing the stakeholders by working on everything in parallel, thereby accumulating a lot of delay cost. All right. Too much analysis. We want to be right. And so there's a lot of decision making stalled because we're indecisive. We're not sure, we need more analysis, we need more information, more business cases, et cetera, et cetera. We also sometimes have a delay on decision making because we have the decision power that is not mandated to the people who need to make the decisions, but the decision power is still very high up in the organization. The people that don't have the information to make those decisions. So they still rely on other people to make decisions. And usually they're too busy to be even bothered by making these decisions. So that's slowing things down. And there's also some old habits and paradigms that we've always done it like that. We've always made yearly plans for the entire organization. So yeah, why stop doing that? That is how we've done. That's how we became successful. Lack of validation. So after we made some choices on a portfolio level, when we started initiatives, we no longer challenge them. We no longer validate, do they actually yield the results that we thought they would? Or are they actually making enough progress? Or we realize too late that things are not feasible, viable, or desirable. And when we realize that too late, we could have used that development capacity for other more viable initiatives. All right, so what I would like you to do in Mentimeter is tell me which of these 4 things or 3 things you actually recognize in your organization, and which things maybe you don't, or you could also recognize all of the above.
Goed, Niels, je doet het heel goed.
Okay, so some work have too much work in analysis, some have a lack of validation, quite a few have too much work in parallel, but the majority of you have all of these problems in your organization. So I already mentioned in the beginning that if I can at least help one person in this group to make a difference in the organization, that will already be pleasing me, because I think I'm on a mission to try to get rid of a lot of waste of human capital and try to make organizations work a little bit more effectively. Okay, so thanks for sharing. Let's move on to what we could consider in these situations. So when we're working on too much things in parallel, I think I only have one advice for you: make choices. And I don't really care how you do it. Just make them, because even if you are really bad at it and you make the worst possible choices, you're still going to be better off than making no choices, right? So I'm going to share a link to a resource that I like a lot on a website called Folding Burritos, what's in the name, which has 20 prioritization techniques that are listed on that site. And the website also has a lot of interesting information for product owners and business owners to consider. All right, so when we have too much analysis going on, we don't have to be 98% sure, because remember, I told you, we can suck at making choices. We can be wrong and still be right. In the complex domain, we can't plan for the unknown. So thinking about things, analyzing things a little bit further up ahead is not paying off. I know that many of you probably played the ball game, the magic ball game or the agile ball game. And so this is a little bit like that. If you give people an hour in advance to prepare for the best possible way to produce magic balls, it's not going to have much effect. Only after they play the first round will they be able to make a lot of insights. So that is what is going on in the complex domain. So deal with the unknown, be comfortable with uncertainty, and try to get things rolling so that you can start learning much earlier. We want to have empiricism also in the boardroom. When you have a case of lack of validation, I think the first thing to do is to start visualizing the progress of everything that's going on, to visualize your portfolio, and to also think about, why did we start them? And are we creating the results that we were expecting? Before you start working on them, try to identify some key metrics that you need to collect to be able to validate viability, feasibility, and desirability. And try to create metrics that you not only are able to validate after you're done, but also during the execution of that initiative, so that we know when is the time to stop an initiative in favor of another initiative. All right, let's take a look at the team level. What I see a lot in teams is dependencies, but dependencies are not even that bad. The worst case of dependencies is when they're asynchronous. So We can also have other types of dependencies. We can have dependencies on stakeholder decision making. We can have dependencies on the definition of ready, for example, when we are relying on UI input or an architect or some security legal reviews. We can have dependency on deploying after the sprint and operational things. But the problem with dependencies is that they sometimes, or quite often, asynchronous. So let's take a look at what I mean with asynchronous dependencies. So when we have three teams that are supposed to deliver a feature or a part of a project together, then we think that this is what's going to happen, right? We think, okay, we're going to start working on that, then you can start working on this one, and team C will start and finish it at the end. And then we think we're going to be done in 4 sprints. Great, hallelujah. In reality, what's usually happening is that, okay, team A is starting, team B didn't have the time to start at the intended time. They need a couple of sprints to finish another urgent project. And by the time that they start working on it, they realize, oh, team A didn't do something right. So we need to have a conversation. They go over to team A and team A says, we already finished that a couple of sprints ago. Go away, don't bother us, leave us alone. But after some urgent pressing, we managed to get them to do a little bit of work so that that part is done. Then finally, team C is joining the party, and they realize that some changes need to be made in the code base of team B. Some changes need to be made in project code base of team A, and finally also some changes are required in the code of C. And in reality, this is then done in 13 weeks, in 13 sprints. So there's a lot of additional delay that we have accumulated by executing things in an asynchronous dependency. When you visualize all these gray boxes over here, that means is all the other work that's going on in the organization at that time of execution of this. So there's a lot of coordination and alignment needed, which is also quite costly and difficult to manage for product owners that have to keep an eye on everything that's going on there. That's what I meant with asynchronous dependencies. Local optimization. All right, so we have product owners that are actually not really product owners, but they're more like subsystem owners, right? So we have a product owner for location services, so we have a product owner for pricing, or we have a product owner for a part of a system. And therefore, a lot of teams and product owners need to collaborate together on achieving actually business value together. And it's unclear how some of these items in different teams and different product backlogs are holding against each other. How much there's the priorities of all these teams are not aligned because they don't have shared goals for teams of teams. And it's also often unclear how everything is related to the organizational strategy. Code ownership is something that I often see on a team level, is that every team is owning their own code in terms of domain knowledge and also of maybe a repository access even. The higher specialization of teams in domain or technology will mean more dependencies, right? So if you start specializing teams further, at some point you're going to need more teams to achieve a simple thing. This is how we are used to scale organizations, right? So I joined a startup with 4 other people, and so everybody was doing everything, right? And at some point we grew to 30 people, and we needed somebody for HR, and we needed somebody for finance, etc., and for sales and marketing. And then the company grew to 150 people. And all of a sudden, HR needed to be broken up into learning and development, what is it called, recruiting, and people management and things like that. And finance was broken up into procurement and what do you call it, debiting, crediting, and so this is what we used to specializing things further. And the further we'll specialize, the harder it is to get anything done because there will be more dependencies. What we also see in code ownership is that team members identify with a certain skill. I'm a backend developer, I'm a mobile developer, I'm an architect, or I'm a so-and-so, maybe a domain specialist. And when people identify with a specific skill, like backend, then of course, front end is beneath them, right? Because it's their identity that's getting in the way. So I would rather see people as everyone's a developer who happens to bring a certain type of domain knowledge and technical expertise to the table. And when we have code ownership, then usually the knowledge stack is not evolving, right? So probably you heard about COBOL developers in banks. You would like the knowledge stack of organizations to evolve with the organization over time. Yeah, I don't know. React Native is probably the de facto things going on, or is that already outdated? I don't know. I don't keep up with it that much, but if the truth is that most of the technologies that developers are working with these days are created 5 years ago, right? So, or were not so dominant 5 years ago. So what can we consider when we have asynchronous dependencies? I would really like you to consider feature teams because, well, Scrum and Agile originated from lean thinking with the new product development game where Taichi and Nonaka were trying to make a case based on the metaphor of rugby that we needed to have different people with different skill sets to collaborate, to work together as a team. And Scrum was intended to be cross-functional, right? So let's try to live up to that promise and make sure that we get teams to be as much in a situation that they can execute and deliver with fewer dependencies on other teams. And also invest in knowledge sharing. It's important. When we're dealing with local optimization, then try to think, how can we, instead of optimizing on subsystem backlogs, how can we optimize on a product level? How can we optimize for value delivery? What is the shared goal that teams of teams are delivering on? And sometimes it also requires to rethink how the organization is structured so that instead of organizing maybe on domain or technology area, organize around the value delivery, the value streams, sometimes called in an organization, so that they can together work on delivering a certain type of value for customers without being dependent on too many other teams. When we're dealing with code ownership, I really like the principle that I think is defined in Spotify. So there's the mantra of, okay, we will ask you once very nicely if you can do something for us, if we're depending on another team. And when the other team says no, then we'll do it ourselves because we're not going to wait. So of course, you need to have some things in place in the organization to begin with, access to repositories. But I think I really like this principle that we don't want to wait. If you don't have time for us, then we'll do it ourselves. And we might not have the knowledge or expertise. So let's think about what support do we need in order for us to be able to do it themselves. Maybe we can get a little bit of support from a team. Maybe we need a training. Maybe we need to have a temporary team member that is going to guide us, but that's limited waiting. And by doing this, teams will develop auxiliary skills because they will develop skills on stuff that's actually needed. We need this now. We don't have any available. Let's do it ourselves. And then we're able to develop these skills. And the more often we're working on this, the more skills we develop. We call that actually accidental specialization, and which is a good thing because if people work on stuff that's actually needed but nobody is available, then they will learn those things, and the organization, technology stack, and knowledge will evolve on stuff that's actually needed. And in this case, it's very important that teams of teams will have a shared responsibility for quality. When you see a strong culture of code ownership, then usually teams are protective of their code base. They don't want other teams to touch it because they don't want them to break it, right? So if we're going to open that repository to other teams, then we need to make sure that we have very strong guidelines on quality. All right, so good. Let's take a look on delays on a sprint level. Work is not done, all right? That's probably happening. So when we move undone work to the next sprint, we delay learning. If a half-complete story is not presented in the sprint review, we don't get stakeholder feedback, we only learn one sprint later. When we're breaking up things and we end up with part 1, 2, and 3, then we're not learning anything in sprint 1 and 2. We only are able to learn after 2 sprints. There's a lot of delayed learning in that case. And of course, also delayed return on investment. Cycle time. Usually teams, they have a 2-week sprint. They say, well, you know, we're so agile, we're 2-week sprints, high five, sprint done. But then how many sprints does it take us to get items ready? We need to have architect approval, security, legal, UI, UX. So it takes a couple of sprints before actually stuff is ready to start working on. But actually also when we're finished with something in a sprint, it's not really ready to be deployed yet. It's because there's maybe a regression test, performance test, or security audit, or whatever is needed done. And maybe there's a couple of sprints before we can actually release things. So that's all risk that also might even incur some rework. All right, so what's the cycle time now? A couple of sprints to get things ready, working on a sprint, couple of sprints to get things to live. So the cycle time of learning is actually much slower than the 2 weeks that we thought we had. Unsolved impediments. Yes, you've been there. The sprint after sprint, the same items are coming up. And team tell us that, okay, we're being slowed down by some items, but not really much is done about it. Could be that there's a lot of rework, a lot of maintenance going on in teams. So what can we do about that? All right, so this was going wrong a little bit, but we can. So when work is not done, stop starting, start finishing. Don't start everything at the same time. Start focusing on finishing things and not starting more things. Avoid the mini waterfall of handing over from front end to back end to QA, vice versa. Make sure that we have WIP limits on product backlog items. Let's, as a team, agree that we don't start more than 3 product backlog items in parallel. And when we consider starting a 4th one, instead, try to think, what can we do to help finish the first one? When you have a lot of challenges in not getting things done in the sprint, maybe you can consider taking a look at the value stream map. The value stream map is basically taking a look at a backlog item and visualizing who started working on what part when, and visualize that. And that maybe you get some ideas. What's your cycle time? All right, so let's take a look at your definition of ready. So sometimes organizations have a very strict definition of ready, that things cannot get started before certain things are met. So instead of waiting for approval, we could also see, hey, if there are some security guidelines, why don't you tell us what those are? We'll try to live up to them, and you can evaluate it after we're done with it in the sprint. Chances are that we actually are delivering stuff that meets your security guidelines, instead of waiting for approval from a very busy security officer beforehand, right? So instead of having approval beforehand, try to move it to evaluation afterwards. Take a look at the gap between the definition of done and what actually is allowed to be deployed. Because if there's a gap in that, then there's a risk for rework, and try to close that gap slowly but surely. Consider things like automating performance testing, regression testing, and maybe other resource-intensive quality checks that are happening. When we're dealing with unsolved impediments, usually I find that impediments that keep reappearing are probably not taken seriously by the organization. And maybe the organization considers this team a bunch of whiners that is always complaining about the same thing. Maybe we need to focus on trying to visualize the impact. How will we impact it? What is the delayed? How can we quantify how much faster we could have been when this impediment is resolved? A business case for resolving this impediment, if you will. It's a clear expectation with management how they are intending to help you resolve, right? If I would be a manager in an organization, a team comes to me and say, hey, we can go faster if you help us with this. Who am I to deny that, right? So that should make a lot of sense to organizations. And agree with teams on long-term improvement goals. If you only focus on sprint after sprint retrospective items, it's like walking on a sidewalk, only looking 1 meter ahead, right? So there's probably longer goals that we need to work towards. And if we say, well, we need to invest in knowledge sharing, or we need to invest in improving the quality or test automation, you can't fix it in one sprint. So let's try to make concrete, achievable retrospective action point items that we can actually validate at the end of the sprint to say, yes, we completed that or not. All right. Yes, and then finally, by changing nothing, nothing is changing, right? So that is, is hopefully a cue for you to try to take something out of this in your organization. I would like to hear from you in the Mentimeter, what this has resulted for you. Was there anything that you think you can try out or you can work on further? Maybe there's a couple of things that you could consider, or maybe you're thinking about things, or could be that, there was not really anything helpful for you. Also a possibility. Okay, well, I'm happy that I was able to provide some value for some people, and I would be really interested to hear. You can always contact me if you have any questions. If you want to know how to continue with some suggestions I made, and I would also like to hear if you managed to have any success with that. So thanks for sharing, and I think we can move over to questions.
Yeah, so we had a few different questions coming in. Our first question is from Surichi. Surichi, are you still here?
Yes, I'm here.
I'm hoping I'm saying your name right.
Yes, you did it well.
Do you want to go ahead and say your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering how we can avoid delivery delays if one team is technically dependent on other, and looks like he has covered some of the aspects in intra-team dependencies. So I got answer to some level, but if you have any additional thoughts, feel free to share.
Can you explain the challenge that you're facing a little bit more
Yes.
detail?
Yes, absolutely. For example, I'm working as a Scrum Master for front-end team, okay? And there are going to be some components of, or technical components of PBIs that are dependent on back-end teams. Back-end teams are not fully agile. They are running waterfall also because of some constraints. So they have different dates to deliver those technical components. And then because of those dependencies, my Scrum team is going to be delayed on delivery, waiting on them.
Yeah,
So
so you're
that-
saying the teams that depending on are not even working in Agile on a short sprint cycle, right? So that means it's going to be harder for them to be able to get them to make some changes. And so maybe one thing to consider is to say, how can we get our team to be able to adopt enough backend skills to be able to make some basic changes, right? So that, yes, we are, so the backend team is the service provider, but we can probably also get a little bit of knowledge of that service in our team, so that not everything can be done in our team, but some basic changes could actually already be worked on in your team. It could even be that, they get more familiar with the code, they can make a couple of suggestions on, we think that this would be the solution, and then that could be probably already saving a little bit of time of the waterfall backend teams.
Yes, that makes sense. I was thinking about enhancing cross-functionality within the team. And I think that aligns well with your answer. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up we have Alexander. Is Alexander still here? Delianis?
Here. I mean, it's a little bit hypothetical, but it's perfectly clear when you have how the sequential implementation of projects is much better than any kind of breaking down our time. That said, if there is the possibility of having independent teams that could handle different projects, I would assume this is something that makes sense to have it in parallel. Or is there also some kind of impact that is not evident, even though they are in theory independent teams?
Yeah, so let's say you have an organization with 5,000 people. And if all those people have all the required technology skills and all the required domain expertise, sorry, I'm going to take a sip of the water. Then of course, the best possible execution is for everyone to work on one project, finish it, and move on to the next. But that is not very realistic, right? So I'm not saying is that organizations can only work on one thing in parallel. What I'm trying to say is try to reduce it to the absolute minimum of the number of projects in progress. And what I see happening in many organizations is that they have a lot of things in progress. I already was talking yesterday to one of my colleagues that we have an organization that I visited in November, and I asked them, how many initiatives do you have in progress currently? And they had in November 26 initiatives ongoing. And then my next question was, how many did you manage to finish this year? So they finished 5 that year. But that just doesn't add up, right? So sometimes organizations keep on going without taking a step back and looking, what the hell are we doing? This doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So let's try to add focus to the organization, right? So focus is also one of the Scrum values, but I think focus is also something that the Kanban community is very strongly about, limiting WIP. And in reality, I think most of the organizations are working on too many things in parallel and thereby accumulating a lot of delay cost.
Thanks, Niels. Alexander, is that answer your question? You all good? Perfect. Great. Rebecca, just trying to see if Rebecca is there.
Hi, I'm here. Thank you for this talk. It was really interesting. I wanted to dive a little bit into metrics, if you could. You had one slide where it was like, run some metrics on these things. And what I'm curious about your thoughts on kind of metrics in general, but the part that I find harder to quantify for the organization is kind of upstream. It's really easy to look at the team metrics and sort of show them how they're working and should you break down work. But the organization that I worked in, the issue they had was before it gets to the team. And I found that really hard to quantify for them because they're not using any tooling to really track idea creation through this awful waterfall funnel. Do you know what I mean? And I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
You mean on a portfolio level?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think organizations spend a lot of time on decision-making process and if we spend a lot of time, then let's also make sure that we were right. And let's also make sure that if we were wrong, then we can learn something from it and make better informed decisions going forward. So I think the 3 points of feasibility, desirability, and viability are from Alex Ostenwalder from Strategizer. And those are probably 3 things that are trying to define, is our product so to think about what are the assumptions that we're making about a product. We think that there's a customer that wants to buy it. We think there's a customer that's willing to pay a certain price for it, or we think that that we have a technology that is able to solve that problem. So we need to validate a lot of those assumptions, and so therefore we need to think about what metrics should we collect to be able to say, okay, we have a business case. We think that this is has a certain potential. How can we prove that that was true? And then before we start the initiative, we have to define those metrics beforehand so that we can track them while we're working on it. It's a little bit like we're starting a website and then we're going to say, okay, how many visitors do we have? Well, we don't know. Nobody put in a Google Analytics tag in it, right? So what are the Google Analytics tags for your project, and what are the things that you want to know? Do you want to know that customers find the product easy to use because your current version wasn't so user friendly? Okay, was it because I think the exercise that I think would be helpful about it, to challenge all the stakeholders and to try to list all the assumptions that we're making, because there's a lot of implicit assumptions that we're making that are not really servicing, but we probably should get them out in the open. And what I see that a lot of organizations keep telling them themselves how great it's going to be when this is finally live. But it's also good to take a look from the other perspective. What could be reasons that our product is going to fail, and how can we prevent that? And what metrics do we need to collect to be able to prove that we were right? And what metrics do we need to collect to detect early that we should stop this initiative and should start another one?
Yeah. Yeah. And I find a resistance, at least, and this is a cultural problem, obviously, in my org, that when they're really obvious metrics like number of customers or things like that, there's no way to hide that. You see if it worked or not. But when it's something a little more loose, there's a real resistance to identifying those, because there's a resistance to showing we picked the wrong horse to bet on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and maybe people feel that they
want
are
a bad metric. Yeah.
Maybe people in certain culture, they don't want to be the one, oh, you're the one from the failed project, right?
Right.
So that kind of transparency is what is sometimes difficult in organizations, but
Right.
it's actually needed, right? You should
Totally.
get an award for the first one that fails, who should get an award, right?
Taking a swing.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Great. I think we've got time maybe for one more question. So I see Jen there. Jen, you have a question then? Do you want to put that forward?
Oh, yeah, thanks. It was really interesting, by the way. Thank you very much, Niels. Just on the subject of complexity, and how do you approach leaders who maybe don't accept that they're in the realm, or that you're working in the realm of complexity, and are therefore sort of expecting different behaviors and practices from people, and seem to, no matter how much you talk to them about the fact that you are in the complexity.
That happens sometimes, and there is sometimes a little bit of complacency in certain parts of the organization. Money is flowing in, and why bother? There's no sense of urgency. But it's important to realize is that this cash cow of this product is going to end up dry at some point, and we need to have alternatives as well, right? So I think what we're trying to show leaders is that there's a very interesting guy called Gary Hamel, who explains that change is changing. Change is getting so much more rapid, and things are getting even more complex. So we have globalization, right? So in the 50s, you used to buy your vacuum cleaner from the store around the corner, and now you can get it from anywhere in the world. Technology is getting more complexer. Everything is interconnected, and time to market is under pressure. And all those things together means that there's almost no IT projects anymore that are not complex. So, and the old way of managing things was by using this waterfall approach of try to do more planning up front, and then we're also going to get better. But I think we have to start embracing more and more that we can't always predict everything. There's unforeseen things. Yeah, so my advice to you is that there's probably a couple of interesting resource that I can share with you with videos from people in that space that maybe you could consider watching or sharing with some leaders who are a little bit reluctant. But I cannot force them to accept it, right? So
yeah, I think that's kind of like, you know, is that thing about how far do you go, and have you discovered ways that do work or not? And obviously I think it's not necessarily that there are specific ways that work, it's whether those people are ready to hear that message or not, isn't it?
Yeah, with my colleague Garbrand, I was also on the call over here. We were doing a couple of leadership trainings and workshops in an organization, and I think we're just trying to use a couple of models to help them reflect on their own organization and the market they're in, and to try to give them alternative perspectives on things. And I think that is the only thing that we can do, and whether they are taking the bait or not is sometimes a little bit unpredictable.
Out of your control. I would appreciate it if you can share any resources you've got. That would be really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. You're welcome.
Great. So we have 2 minutes left. I don't know if you want to take another question or if you just want to end it there, Niels. It's up to you.
I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions that people may have. Yeah.
All right. So the next person was Tristan Brave.
Hi, I was thinking about a situation where you've got a mature product, you get a lot of things through from a support department that are going to be disparate across the product, and very different idea of measuring the value, thinking about the return on investment in that model. So yes, any advice on metrics to use to partly as a tool to influence stakeholders?
So when you are starting a completely new initiative in a very innovative space, of course, you have to deal with other metrics than when you have an established product that is in a more mature situation. But if you have a very mature product, then maybe you can take a look at things like the quality of service that you provide to the customers, right? So, or maybe the speed of delivery, or those kind of metrics, because they are more important in the mature situation. I think there's less metrics around learning about, are we building a viable, feasible, or desirable product, right? Because hopefully by becoming mature, we've already proven that. And we can probably take a look more at the quality of service that we provide to the customer, speed of delivery, or maybe the perceived quality by the customer. So there's probably a lot of research that you can do to invite maybe even users to hear from them how they experience your product. Makes sense? Is that answering your question? Okay.
Great stuff. Guys, we are just on time, so thank you so much, Niels, for that today. I think there's lots of discussions. I think there is a few questions, but maybe if you want to connect with Niels directly, you could follow up with the questions. I'm sure he'd be happy. Just volunteer you there, Niels. Sorry.
No, I usually say that I have a what do you call it? Lifetime warranty on my session, so you can always reach out to me and hopefully I can get you an answer. Yeah.
Well, you couldn't ask for a better guarantee than that. A lifetime warranty. Thank you. That was a fantastic session. And guys, the recording will be available on the Agile Mastery Meetup YouTube channel. So please feel free to go along to that. We also posted on the meetup as well. So Jeff usually posts it up there as well after the session. So you'll be able to go back and rewatch. And anybody that didn't have their questions answered, if they want to reach out to Niels. And we look forward to you attending the next sections that are coming up that Jeff advertised. So thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for attending,
everyone.
and thanks a lot for your collaboration and interaction today.